Welcome to Crushing Creative Block from Golden Spiral. My name is Mark Whitlock, and I look forward to interacting with you today. Thanks for joining us. We've got a number of folks on board from across the country this morning, and I couldn't be more excited about talking about Crushing Creative Block. This message is not just for content creators and for those who write or do creative work. This is for anyone. If you create a spreadsheet, if you're looking at creating marketing automation platforms and sequences, whatever you do, if you feel like you get blocked in what you are trying to accomplish, this webinar is for you. I'm sure you felt blocked, right? Have you ever just in your work just feel like you've gotten to a place and you can't go any farther? The road is completely closed. That's what we're going to be dealing with today. And if you're like me, you probably feel like this guy from Greek mythology, Sisyphus. This guy was cursed to push a rock up a mountain, and as he got higher and higher and higher, eventually it would fall back on him and it would roll all the way to the bottom of the hill, and he would have to start all over again. Poor Sisyphus. For many of us, I know for me especially, doing my creative work can sometimes feel this way. Am I ever going to get finished? Am I ever going to wrap it all up? And over the course of time, I've learned a few things along the way. Again, my name is Mark Whitlock. I'm the marketing manager here at Golden Spiral, and I work on our inbound marketing efforts and head our creative and content efforts here at Golden Spiral. Golden Spiral is a integrated full-service marketing agency for B2B tech companies. We work primarily with financial technology, health technology, cybersecurity, business intelligence, and other companies with a SaaS solution, a software solution. But my background goes way back into nonprofit work, to broadcasting, and to many other things. Like many of you, I've got a life outside of work. I'm in a blended family, and this is some of my kids, and we have a lot of fun and get to have a lot of fun. My oldest daughter, who's in the purple there on the back, she just got married a couple weeks ago, and so hopefully this picture will transform in the coming weeks and months. When Creative Block came real to me was really in 2003. Up until that point, I'd been a staff writer. I'd been working on projects and had a number of titles to my name and was feeling like I was at the height of my career. I was a published author, I was a staff writer, so I was helping other people write stuff, I was ghostwriting, I was creating my own work. And then all of a sudden it hit me one day that no matter what I did, I missed every deadline. I had great editors, I had great production people, I had people all around me helping me accomplish my work. But for me, I hit no deadlines. I missed them all. And the people behind me cleaned up my messes and hit their deadlines, stayed late at night to do their work, etc. And I'm grateful for all the work that they did. But at the same time, I know that I stressed everybody out. And so over the course of time, I had to figure out a number of ways to make sure that I got to a place where I could do clear sailing, that driving was not impeded, not blocked, etc. And we're going to talk about that journey that I went on today and the lessons that I learned the hard way. And hopefully you can learn them more easily than I did. Our outline for today, we're going to take a look at some giveaways coming up here in just a second. We're going to look at the 3 reasons we get blocked in the first place. We're also going to talk about 5 techniques to break creative block. Now, if you've been blocked and you've looked around, you've searched the internet some, you probably know there are hundreds of ways, hundreds of techniques to crush your block. We're going to talk about 5 things that are tried and true for me in my creative work that I even used this week. Then we're going to take your questions and we're going to award a single prize here at the end of our time today for those who stick around all the way to the bitter end. So let's talk about some giveaways. First of all, if you post now or later on social media, you post about us, you tag us with our social media handle, and you use the hashtag #CrushingBlock, we're going to send you a Golden Spiral Scout book and pen. This is a really great thing to have right by your bedside or have in your desk. Sometimes typing on a smartphone or a computer just doesn't work. You need something else. You need something tangible and physical. And these scout books are great items to have there with you at all times. We'd be happy to send one to you. If you decide to make a web post, that's on your vlog, a post of any website that links to our website, we've got a much bigger prize for you. We have the Golden Spiral Brainstorming Kit. This includes a water bottle to stay hydrated, the scout book and pen, a candle that is, aromatherapy can help us get unblocked. The great thing about this candle is once it burns all the way down, it becomes a glass for your favorite cocktail. Very, very cool. A comfy t-shirt, a bag to keep everything in. And because we have a movie-themed webinar today, we're going to throw in a $20 Fandango gift card for you. So if you make a web post about us on your blog or your website, we'll send all of this to you. Plus, at the end of today's webinar, we're going to give away a $100 Amazon gift card to somebody who sticks around to the end, just as our way of saying thanks and being a part of this. Okay, let's dive into our content. There are 3 reasons, at least from my vantage point, that we get blocked in the first place. And I love this picture. To me, this just describes my life so well. I don't know what's waiting for me around the corner. That's because I'm afraid. Fear is the #1 killer to our creative work. Best-selling author Jerry Jenkins believes that there isn't such a thing as writer's block. In his case, he would be talking about writer's block. He believes that the people he knows, the people who feel blocked, are those who pay their bills. They clean their house, they go to work, they fill up the tank, they get their grass mowed, or their sidewalk shoveled in the wintertime. But for whatever reason, their work, their creative work, gets blocked because of fear. Now, for me, I have to tell you, I have lived a life dominated by fear. Fear has been my close companion for a long time. And for many, many years, I didn't understand what fear was. And fear is actually a gift. Think about this. Use an old of the hot stove, and a child, tell the child, you don't touch the hot stove, you will get burned. And you want to instill in that child a sense of fear, but a lot of times that child's going to be curious anyway, and eventually reach that hand up there and get zapped and burned a little bit. And then there's a healthy fear of not being burned again. So fear is a gift to us. It motivates us. It keeps us sharp. In the case of danger to our lives, we get an adrenaline rush. Our eyes dilate. We see better. We hear things. Our senses become more acute. It's a gift to help us survive. In the same way, fear about our creative work is a gift. Now, fear is actually on a spectrum. And this is the work of Chip Dodd, who is a therapist here in practice in Nashville, and I've really appreciated his work since 2012 as I've delved into this. On one side of the spectrum is this sense of impairment. Fear can be impaired. It can be messed up. Just think about your muscles and working out. You can have an injury. That muscle is a gift to keep you erect, to move you faster, to help you do your day's life. But if that muscle gets injured, pulled, bruised, it's impaired. On the other side, there's a gift, a full-blown gift of that muscle. In this case, a full-blown gift of fear. So on the impaired side, worry is a big deal. So I know for me, I don't know about you, I worry, is this project going to work? Are we going to come in under budget? Are we going to come in on time? Is this going to meet the needs of our audience? Are we going to have the right amount of traffic from this? Does it look right? Does it sound right? Do we have the right outline? All those questions can drive me crazy. I worry. There's anxiety around it. There's the biting of the fingernails, the pacing around. There are things that you feel, or the things that I feel, that make me feel anxious. But probably the best word that captures what I feel like is the impaired side of fear is catastrophizing. It's a made-up word, but I have a great imagination. More than likely, if you're doing creative work, you do too. And you can come up with every conceivable thing that could go wrong in the process of what you're trying to accomplish. we make catastrophes out of everything. And so that's the impaired side. The gifted side is a key word, and that's wisdom. And wisdom is an amazing thing. And it comes from a number of places, but the definition of wisdom I like best comes from Greek, and it means skill in everyday living. And it comes from Sophia in the Greek language. And that's where we get our word sophisticated from. We want to have this feeling of sophistication about our work. And when we understand the things that can really go wrong, but we embrace the gift of fear, we can be sophisticated. Another way of looking at it would be like this guy, a very highly skilled carpenter who works with hand tools. He has great skill in all of the pieces and puzzles that he needs to do to create a chair or a bookcase or a headboard for a bed or whatever he or she would be mastering there. That's skill in everyday living. You have great skill in what you're doing. And if you can harness that and understand and embrace the gift of that fear, you can have great skill in everyday living when it comes to your creative work. So fear is the first thing that the reason we get blocked in the first place. The second is disorganization. Now, before you jump to conclusions and start yelling at me across the internet connection, know that I embrace a sense of messy desk here. This is a picture from the movie The Intern. And if you haven't seen it, it's a great story of how people get along in a modern office. And over here on the left side of the picture in the gray sweater is the assistant to the CEO, played by Anne Hathaway, who's in the red dress on the right side of the page. And Anne has given her so much incredible work that her desk is just completely and utterly destroyed. She can't get through it. Robert De Niro, there in the middle, plays a man who is coming out of retirement after the death of his wife to come back into the workplace. And he essentially helps the assistant get unblocked and get things accomplished in the course of time. Now, this scene is probably, maybe, kind of inspired by this and many other famous pictures of great leaders, especially in technology and otherwise, and ideas and thoughts, Albert Einstein and others, who had incredibly messy desks and messy offices. The type of organization I'm talking about is not cleaning up your messy desk. I'm talking about the organization of ideas and especially the concept of boundaries. You want to have boundaries in your work, a sense of organization and boundaries in your work so that you can play, you can create freely. So in the 1960s in New York City, psychologists were worried about the children. They came by these public schools in New York City and they had these huge, high chain link fences circling the playgrounds. And they looked at the children and went, wow, these children must feel like prisoners behind bars. And so they removed the chain link fences. Well, something interesting happened. The children played as close to the building as they possibly could. There was equipment that they didn't use. There were wide open spaces on those playgrounds that they didn't use because they didn't feel free. They had a sense of fear. They scooted up next to the building to be close to the teachers and to be close to the building. So these great minds put those fences back up, and guess what? The children played over the entire acreage or square footage of that playground again. That's what we need. We need healthy boundaries so that we can push all the way to the edge, so we can play with every sense of square foot we have in the work that we're doing. And then we can push the boundaries. But by having boundaries, we have the most freedom to accomplish the work that we need to work. So when I talk about disorganization, I mean, set your boundaries. That would be a schedule. That would be accountability. There would be other things that would help you get your work done. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit. You'll hear more about organization and organizing work and organizing thought as we get deeper into the podcast. So we've had the two things that block, the reasons we get blocked in the first place: fear, disorganization, and the third is a lack of purpose. A lack of purpose. One of my favorite TV shows of all time is the TV show MASH. And if you remember ever watching the show in reruns or back when it was on, you remember that they had this great signpost in the camp that pointed to all the hometowns of the folks who lived and worked there at the Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. And I remember as a teenager looking at that, being kind of confused. Where would you go? Where would I go? Where would I go? Too often we ask ourselves that question. Where are we going to go? Where are we going to go? We need a sense of purpose, a defined sense of purpose, a written purpose, if you will, for every project that we do. We need to know who the audience is. We need to know what this project is for. And even if that's just on a Post-it note on your computer screen, to know that this piece of content that I'm creating is for this particular audience. We're gonna talk directly to the person who installs the software at our target company. That's who this piece of content is for, and we want to educate. That's our purpose. Just by having a couple of words on a Post-it note, you can get rid of all the other signposts and all the other things in your mind. Well, we could do this with this piece. We could do that. We could do this with this marketing automation. Oh, this spreadsheet ought to talk about this. All of those things can go away, and you can have your laser focus. And I call that our why. We need our why. And understanding the why before we begin a project is a big deal. So again, the 3 reasons we get blocked in the first place: fear, disorganization, and a lack of purpose. And right there at the middle of them, and man, if we have more than one of those, boy, do we feel blocked. Do we feel blocked? So let's get into the 5 ways to crush creative block. And each of these has a movie theme. Here we go.
He's in the bathroom. AW9.
I remember in 1995 in Mission Impossible, they came over the hurdle. They had so many obstacles to overcome, and what they did is they went over everything. And in the same way, we need to get over what is blocking us. The first thing what we'll want to do to get over is get over all of our ideas. I alluded this just a little bit ago, in that we come up with tons and tons of things. We get blocked, and we all of a sudden we think, I got to get over this. I got to get over this. And what about this? Or what about this option? What about this option? All of a sudden, our minds are clouded. Maybe even our meetings, or maybe our bosses or our coworkers, where all of a sudden we're very clouded with all of these ideas. And the core is to get over all of those ideas, to simplify, to get back to that purpose, to get back to what it is we're trying to accomplish. And that is a key thing in getting over. Another thing we want to get over is our inner voices. Again, I don't know about you, but for me, I feel like I've got a mob of people inside. I've joked with my wife from time to time that sometimes I wonder if I'm struggling from multiple personality disorder. It's not a joke. I know people do struggle with that, but there's so many things, so many different opinions I have in my own head. And what I've discovered is many creative people have the same thing. They've got this mob of voices in their heads. And the goal is to organize them. So eventually they feel like uh, a bunch of knights with a common purpose sitting around the round table, coming up with ideas for how to rule the kingdom and for how to accomplish things. So you've got all these inner voices, all these things, including doubt and new ideas and chasing the next great thing. The goal is to organize them and to have that simplified purpose so that we can get over those inner voices and move forward. The third thing we want to get over is our perfectionism. And even if you don't feel like you're a perfectionist, I bet sometimes you drive and you try to get things done and maybe you flirt with that. I know I do. I love this quote. This gentleman was one of the early pioneers of flight, and he lived in France and was the head of all the French aviation. And I love what he says about perfection, that it's not adding more, it's making sure that there's nothing left to take away. I've heard a friend of mine who's a graphic designer talk about this as well. The goal is to make sure that it's as simple as possible, that it communicates everything it needs to do, but it's not crowded, it's not clouded with everything. I have a friend who's a poet, and his job in editing all of his poems is to make sure that there's no extraneous words, that the poems are as simple as they can be. So we strive to make sure that there's nothing left to take away. I know it's easy to become perfectionistic at points, and then there's also this flippant attitude. Okay, so I don't want to be perfectionist, so we're going to throw it against the wall and see what sticks. So somewhere in the middle of that is this sense of excellence, is a sense of quality that you want to have. And what I want to challenge you to do is when you're creating your creative work, don't worry about that. All of that comes in the polishing. All of that comes in the finishing. But getting that rough part done, getting the first draft or the first take or the first demo, finishing that first is not an exercise in perfectionism, but is an exercise of getting over the blocks and moving forward. So how do we get over creative block? I'll give you three ideas for you. One is a brain dump. My favorite way of doing a brain dump, if I'm crowded, if I've got lots of inner voices happening and I'm just struggling, I'll go into a room with a whiteboard and I will start jotting notes. Sometimes I can't even read my own handwriting, but I'll jot them. Sometimes I have to put up extra pieces of paper on the wall to get all of the ideas together. Sometimes I'll do it with Post-it notes, but I'll write it all up there. And then I'll take a picture of it to make sure I don't miss anything. And then I'll start taking away. I'll erase, I'll pull down Post-it notes and throw them away. I'll tear down sheets of paper. But in the process, I will eliminate all of the things that are extra, that don't need to be a part of it. But by getting it out of my brain, it gives me a sense of clarity. It gives me a sense of understanding about where I need to go from here. So brain dump's a great way to do that. Another way is to have an editor. And I know editors are common when we're writing, but not all of us are involved in writing. Some of us are involved in photography or web design or wireframe creation or demo production or product development. And an editor, we'll just call it an editor, take that from the publishing world and apply it to everybody. It's just another person, an objective listener, objective viewer, objective reader, objective, whatever term you need to use to look at those things and help you understand what's going on. I came out of the publishing world, as I mentioned before, and there's a role of editor called the substantive editor. They're not just checking for commas and spelling and punctuation. They're looking at the overall idea of what you're communicating. And I find that a substantive editor can be a great friend. It can be very intimidating, but to have someone look at it all and go, are you accomplishing your objective? Are you accomplishing your why? Are you hitting your target for your audience? Does it communicate what you need to communicate? Does it meet the needs of the person you're creating this for? And having that person come alongside you and interact with you about those questions is a rich experience. So I encourage you to have a substantive editor. If you're looking at a spreadsheet, we have something here we call the eye test. And we produce a spreadsheet even for internal use. We run it past somebody else who's good with numbers and spreadsheets. And they just take a quick look at it to make sure that everything seems to be working, the equations work, et cetera. With a wireframe, another developer will show it to, a single developer will show it to another developer to click through and to make sure that it works. Same thing with marketing automation sequences. Whatever the case you're doing, to have another person kind of chop through it with you, it would be great. It's like having an external brain. It's really, really worth it. So we talked about the brain dump, we talked about editor. Another thing would be to have a truth list. And this kind of gets at the fear part of having to get over block. What's true about this right now? So you could be a freelancer, maybe you're an employee, but whatever, you've been assigned this task. You carry the baton for doing this work. So that's something to be very, very excited about. You carry the baton. You've been chosen for it. Know that. Remember that. A lot of the projects that we have to do, you either have done tons of research or you have life experience and business experience that prepares you for that moment. You are prepared. You are the most prepared out of those available for this task. So tell yourself the truth about that. You've been trusted by leadership or your client to do this. So sometimes writing those things down just to remind yourself of what's true about this project will help you get over the voices in your head and the fear and the other things and get you moving forward to get over your block. With every single one of these techniques to crushing block, we're going to mention a caution. The caution with getting over block is that if you use this repeatedly in your creative work, there's going to come a time when you are a little arrogant. Yep. You're going to think, well, I've got this. I know these things about myself. I have the research. I'm moving ahead. And maybe you're not relying on the voices that you need to rely on, of the other people, that external brain. Don't swerve into overconfidence and arrogance. Stay humble, stay teachable in this as you move forward. So the first technique for overcoming, for crushing creative block is the Tom Cruise, getting over creative block. Number two is the Morgan Freeman, working around. We're going to go to another movie clip. Somebody chatted with me that they didn't have any audio in the previous movie clip. We'll see if it works this time, and if not, we'll figure out what's going on there. So work around to crush your creative block.
Beautiful, isn't it?
Beautiful, unethical, dangerous. You've turned every cell phone in Gotham into a microphone.
And a high-frequency generator receiver.
You took my sonar concept and applied it to every phone in the city. With half the city feeding you sonar, you can image all of Gotham. This is wrong.
I've got to find this man, Lucius.
At what cost?
The database is null key encrypted. It can only be accessed by one person.
This is too much power for one person.
That's why I gave it to you. Only you can use it.
Spying on 30 million people isn't part of my job description.
This is an audio sample. If he talks within range of any phone in the city, you can triangulate his position.
I'll help you this one time. But consider this my resignation. As long as this machine is at Wayne Enterprises, I won't be.
When you're finished, type in your name.
It's a very intense scene from The Dark Knight, and we know that definitely wanted to get the Joker. But Morgan Freeman saw a lot of problems with that, and this is the one that has the greatest caution of all of the techniques for crushing creative block. This one has the worst consequence, if you will. The key to working around your creative block is this: forward momentum matters. Moving forward, accomplishing things matters. We have a habit here in our agency that at the end of every day, we update our project management software. I know there are days when projects I work on, other ones that developers and designers work on, that they spend a great deal of their day working on the project. But if they didn't update the software, nobody would know. There wouldn't be anything to show for the work that had been accomplished. The work that we do is difficult, is challenging. It takes time. It doesn't take minutes. It takes hours or days or weeks or worse. So forward momentum matters. What are you doing to help you remember your forward momentum? And you can become, I can become incredibly discouraged if I'm not journaling that, if I'm not making that known to myself and others. I don't think I'm moving forward. It also holds you accountable to making sure you are, to keep from getting discouraged. The concept of working around creative block strikes at the myth of linear creation. Let's take the case of a book just to have as an example. We've all read them or listened to audiobooks. We know a book idea. So some would think that if there are 12 chapters in a book, that the author started with page 1 and wrote to the end. That's not correct. Linear creation is not always the way things happen. And as an editor at a major publisher, one of the things that I talked with my writers about is, if you have an outline that you're working off of, then write the core pieces. If you feel stalled, don't worry about writing the next thing. Jump ahead, go around that roadblock, and find something you can write about. And what would end up happening is that writer would get 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 words a day done, and then we'd have to begin to put the puzzle together and put it back together. And then it takes a tutorial process to make sure there's a through line and that everything makes sense. But in a lot of ways, the same thing is true for what you're doing. If you're building a website, a marketing automation software, a spreadsheet, a marketing campaign, an advertising campaign, you don't have to do things in a straight line. Do them in an linear fashion. Go around the block and keep moving so that you have that sense of forward momentum. You're getting work done, and then you have to do the main thing and come back. We'll talk more about coming back in just a second. So how do you keep moving forward? The idea I want to leave you with is the batarang. You remember this from Batman's utility belt. He would throw it and it would come back to him like a boomerang. The batarang was a core tool for what he wanted to accomplish, and that's the same type of idea. You've always got to come back to the holes, because if you don't, you're going to have a very difficult time. That's the big caution. You have to come back. Let me tell you about a friend of mine. I have a friend, like many friends here in Nashville, who's a musician, and he was headed to a gig, and it was one of the first times he was going to take his son along to a gig for him to see things up close and personal. And he had the directions. This is in the days before GPS and Google Maps on our iPhones. He was getting close, and he knew he was close, but he wasn't sure. So he saw a police officer behind one of those fluorescent orange and white roadblock barriers. And he went around the barrier to talk to the police officer. The police officer was incredibly helpful, gave him excellent directions, but before he let my friend go, he wrote him a ticket. Can you believe that? He wrote him a ticket because he went around the roadblock barrier, which was illegal. So when you work around your creative block, in some ways, it's considered illegal. Okay, give yourself the ticket to make sure that you go back and fill in the blanks. I have prepared sales decks and used this technique, but had forgotten to go back and fix a slide that I'd gotten blocked on. Whoops. I've worked on projects where I've had an editor come back and go, well, this whole second section of this chapter is non-existent. Well, that's because I went around it. I thought I'd finished the entire first draft. I got my ticket to go back and to fix what I'd lost. So you've got to have that batarang to make sure you come back to where you were and keep moving forward. So the first technique for overcoming creative block, get over that creative block. The second one, work around. Go around the side of that, the block, and just keep moving. Avoid the myth of linear creation. Keep moving forward. Keep moving forward. And the third technique for overcoming creative block is inspired by the Italian Job.
flag.
Metro just passed through the station. You are clear for 90 seconds. Go.
Come on, Steve.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
30 seconds and counting. Seconds, you're either blocked in or you're paint on the train. Oh, go, come on, come on. Stay right on me, this is gonna be tight. Go. You're gonna stop right there.
Doesn't that make you want to get a Mini Cooper? I know it does for me. The Italian Job. So sneaking under creative block. This is the most fun, and this is the one that we all want to go to first. How do we use fun and creativity to get over our writer's block or our creator's block, creative block, and keep moving forward? Just doing what we want to do. So this is fun. There's a whole host of things we can do. This is the bag of tricks for crushing creative block, and I'm going to throw out a few of them here. But again, there's so many that you can tap for this. If you haven't seen this book by Roger Von Eck, A Whack on the Side of the Head, came out in the 80s and has been updated over time. This is a classic. This is almost, you can drop the book on the floor and whatever page it opens up to, you can take that idea and work on your block. So one of the ways I'd say to do that is, you're blocked. Okay, what am I blocked about? I can't figure out how to do X. Okay, you open up this, you pull out another tool from your bag of tricks, and you apply that task, that fun thing, to the exact spot where you are blocked. Here at Golden Spiral, we had a Lego building festival at our latest retreat because we wanted to talk about how playing together and building things could help us solve our problems. So Legos could be great. There are these things that I don't think my webcam's on. I'm going to turn it back on here. Hopefully you can see my webcam now. I've got these cool dice. They're called story cubes. And what you do is you take a bunch of them and you roll them and you can come up with a story. So I've got a shelf, a rainbow, a tent, an alien, and the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Okay, what do I do with all that? Well, I look at what I'm doing and I say, how does it apply? Maybe there's an analogy I want to use. Maybe there is just a simple metaphor I can create at that point. Maybe I could be inspired and make it a whole Area 51 thing. Who knows? But you can use things like these plot device dice, pipe cleaners, playing cards, a phone book. Does anybody ever have a phone book anymore? I used to love to open up a phone book, especially the yellow pages, and be inspired by what I'd see on the page. I guess that's hard to do now, and sometimes you don't have the same inspiration from a search. I was at one meeting in Colorado many years ago, and they wanted to give us a different perspective on our problem. And so they handed out colored pantyhose, and we put it over our faces. We felt like cat burglars or something with the pantyhose over our heads, but the color, purple or pink or red or black, gave us a different look, a different perspective on the problem. So there, like I said, there's a tons of things in your bags of tricks. One of my favorite tricks is called photo storming. And that is using a photo to inspire you to overcome that block. So again, you come up against something, you can't figure out how to do it. You can use photo storming. So for instance, let's look at this picture. I went and I asked a question to a stock photography website that I like, and this is what came back. So your spreadsheet, what if you had only the time it took for somebody to fill up a tank of gas to show somebody your spreadsheet? Would that help you clarify what you're trying to say and simplify it and make it easier to understand? Maybe so. You had a concept to explain. You're working on some language for an advertisement. And those people over there on the left-hand side of the screen, if you walked up to them, could you explain your concept to them in the time it took for them to walk into the convenience store to get a soft drink? Maybe that's one way you use this picture. But again, you can go to a stock photography website or even Google Images and type in your problem, type in your statement, type in what you're trying to solve. You'll be amazed at the images that come up that may not have anything to do with the question you asked. And you can begin to piece and pull parts of your answer from those photos. Another thing I want to talk about is the fireside chat. And this is not FDR's fireside chats from the 30s and 40s. This is actually an idea that comes from Wes Craven. Since we have a movie theme, I'll use a movie guy. And I'm not a big fan of this guy's movies at all, but I'm a fan of his technique, and especially this one. Every time he had a new idea for a movie, he would noodle on that idea long enough until he felt like he had the story together. And then he'd call a few friends over for wine and hors d'oeuvres. They'd sit around a fire. I don't know why there was always a fire. Didn't he ever come up with ideas in the springtime or summer? Anyway, I don't know. Anyway, he'd sit around and then he'd start to tell them the story. But what he was really doing was checking to see when they checked out. And I wish I had cameras on all of you to know if there's been a point where you've kind of checked out of this webinar. I hope not. We've lost at least one person. Anyway, but the idea was he wanted to see when people pulled out their phones, when people got bored, when they started shifting around in their seats. And he would know that those are the places that were weak that he needed to shore up. So if you're blocked, you could try some different ways of solving that problem with other people. Another horror writer, Stephen King, talks about his early readers. He has a very select group of people that he lets read early manuscripts and early drafts, and they give him great feedback. Do you have someone like that you have a fireside chat or a sense of early readers with for what you're trying to accomplish? The last idea in the bag of tricks I'll throw at you comes from another movie, comes from the movie Finding Forrester. In this movie, Sean Connery plays a Pulitzer Prize winning author who's now become a recluse. And he befriends a young man who's going to the old private school where he went many, many, many years ago. And at one point, the student gets blocked. And so Sean Connery's character, Forrester, pulls out an old essay that he wrote and said, start with these words, begin typing them. You get the rhythm of typing, and eventually you will begin to have your own words. But that idea of punching the keys, for God's sake, punch the keys, he says. That idea can get you going. It's kind of a cousin to the idea of forward momentum. Just keep doing what you're doing. If you're not writing, if you're doing something else, keep doing. Keep playing around with it, and you might stumble upon the solution that you need. Like every technique, here is a caution for sneaking under creative block as you try to crush it, and that is, don't amuse yourself to death. It can be so much fun to do all of these fun and creative and wacky things that you end up spending all your time doing fun, creative, and wacky things, but you don't get your work done. So we can amuse ourselves away from our deadline as opposed to towards our deadline. And then sometimes with all these creative ideas, there's another caution. You end up with all sizzle and no steak. You come up with a lot of great analogies if you're writing, or you come up with some cool ideas and concepts visually, but is it really what you need? Does it really accomplish the goal? Does it meet your why, your purpose? So make sure that you don't have all sizzle and no steak. So those are your cautions for sneaking under creative block. So we've talked about the Tom Cruise getting over creative block. We've talked about the Morgan Freeman working around creative block. So before we move on to our next one, so we have the Italian Job, sneaking under creative block. But let's make sure that we're talking about questions. If you've got questions, please use the questions module and go to webinar and ask those. We'll get to those here at the end of our time in just a few minutes. I did mention the Italian Job was number 3. Number 4 is the Michael J. Fox. You go back and in the way that you crush your creative block. Michael J. Fox, go back. Now, here's the crazy thing about this technique for crushing creative block. This is the one that I get the most pushback from. This is the one that most people don't want to deal with, but it can be one of the most effective ways for you to crush creative block. We talked about having a purpose or your why before, but having a written purpose is an incredibly helpful thing. Knowing who your audience is, knowing what you're doing a certain project for. Even have that on a post-it note, let alone a formal document, is incredibly important. If you get blocked, go back to the purpose. So many times when I've been working with other creatives, what I found is the reason they're blocked is they're off purpose. They have another creative idea, they're pursuing something, that they're on a tangent, they're on something that is a branch from what they set out to do. And to be reminded of that purpose, it gets that creative person back on task and moving forward. Now, I'm not a great proponent of outlines. I believe in a lot of ways outlines are helpful. In some ways, outlines can hamper creativity, but outlines can provide the boundaries that we talked about before. That freedom that I can run all over the playground, all the way up to the fence and all the way up to the building. That outline gives me that ability. But over the course of time, you have to make sure that outline is pliable. What if you're building it and you realize, you know what, we need to go down this road. There's a lot of content here. There's a lot of hope here. Or, man, the website's really coming together, but the core of the website's here. This is what's going to make this website work best. Whatever your case is, make sure that your outline is malleable. The way I like to look at it is your outline is like a hypothesis for a scientific experiment. You have an idea of what you're doing and what the results are going to be, but not until you start mixing those chemicals or testing the batteries in the flashlights or whatever experiment you're doing, do you really know where you're headed. So your hypothesis may not be your conclusion. So make sure your outline is not your conclusion too, that it's malleable, changeable, editable as you move forward. So how do you go back to crush your creative block? So let's keep with the movie theme. You got to have a flux capacitor. You got to have the thing that you get up to 88 miles an hour and look what happens. That sense of Marty McFly never wanted to stay in 1955. He always wanted to get back. So when you're blocked, you may go back to 1955, go back to your outline, go back to your written purpose, but you always want to make sure you have a way to get back to 1985, to get back to the present day. Another way of looking at it is you want to do regular GPS checks. So I remember many years ago, I was a scout and I loved to do our orienteering experiments, especially the real world stuff where we go backpacking. We try to end up at the same spot. And if you've ever done anything like this, you know that 1 degree off, a step here or a step there, 2 degrees off there, you can end up many yards, maybe even more than a mile away from the final destination because you haven't checked in. We are so spoiled by turn-by-turn directions, but guess what? In the creative work you're doing, you don't have turn-by-turn directions. You're out in the Wild West. You're out in the jungle with a machete. You're forging new territory and a new path. So make sure you always do some GPS checks in, some compass checks in to find out where you are, to make sure you're headed in the right direction. You're headed toward your audience. You're headed toward that written purpose as you move forward. So what's the caution for going back as you crush creative block? Caution is this: paralysis. I have talked to so many folks who they get stuck and they go back and they fret. The fear enters in. They fret over the outline. They fret over the written purpose. Are we headed the right direction? Is this the right audience? Are we doing this? All of those questions can end up bringing you to an absolute standstill. Don't be paralyzed. Keep moving. Try to get back to 1985, if you will. The purpose of going back is to solve a problem. Marty McFly had a problem to solve. That's why he went back to 1955. Once you solve that problem, get back to 1985 and keep living, keep building the creative work that you're building. So the first way to crush creative block, get over it. Secondly, work around it, batarang. Third way, sneak under. Take that Mini Cooper under the subways. Fourth, Michael J. Fox's go back. Go back to 1955, but don't get paralyzed. The fifth way is powering through, and I call this the Keanu Reeves Power through creative block. This is the movie clip that inspired this whole talk to begin with. As soon as that bus crashes through that roadblock sign on the other end of the jump, someday I'll have to grab an actual still of that. But powering through your creative block is the fifth way to crush it. You want to keep moving. Just keep moving, keep moving. Forward momentum, forward momentum, forward momentum. Another way of looking at it would be, we talk about constant motion, who is an author, a very famous author, best-selling author, and he was giving a question and answer session for a bunch of aspiring authors. And one of the guys stood up and got the mic and said, "Doctor, tell me, what is the secret to all of your writing and all of the hundreds of articles and books that you've published?" And he smiled and said, "Keep your gluteus maximus in the chair until the work is done." We expected everything other than that. We expected technical, we expected ideas about research, we expected all of these great ideas, and bottom line, keep your butt in your chair. It's a constant motion. Now, if you're like me, constant motion is not always possible. So I have adopted the Pomodoro technique. Pomodoro comes from the Italian word for tomato, and you've ever seen a tomato kitchen timer, the guy who created the Pomodoro technique had one of those timers, and thus it had the name. And the idea is, can you focus for a period of time, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 5 minutes, and then take a break. So the break should be, 10 to 20%. So you do 30 minutes, then you get 3 minutes off, that type of idea. And that idea will keep you moving. It gives you these laser focused batches of time when you can get things done and you can keep your butt in your chair. And I know in creative environments and open environments, we don't have these beautiful studies full of books to write in, where we can listen to music on the stereo. We live in these open environments with roaring air conditioners, and everybody's got their earplugs in, and it's noisy and visually stimulating around us. It's hard. The Pomodoro technique can help you continue to power through. The other thing about powering through, just keeping on going, not stopping, not letting anything distract you from your work, is having an external conscience. Do you have someone to check in? Maybe not a boss, maybe not someone you're accountable to, but somebody who's walking with you, who's a fellow journeyman or journeywoman on the path that you're headed down, just to kind of keep you balanced and keep you focused. We know there are tons of other things in your work. You have the major project you're on, but that's not the only project, right? Plus, you've got email and phone calls. You got people coming over. You got interruptions. You've got meetings. You've got business trips. You've got trade shows. The list goes on and on and on. So how do you make sure you get your work done? The things that take the time and the concentration and the effort and the most brain power and creativity, that ethereal sense of the muse that we figure out. Maybe having somebody who's walking with you to go, "Hey, how's it coming? How far did you make it?" Somebody you can complain to and whine to. In the movie, Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock had each other. They were a mismatched pair, as one of those great things about Hollywood movies. But they had each other to deal with. And in the case of Keanu Reeves, he had Joe Morton, his police lieutenant or police sergeant, to help him on the radio at points. This external conscience, make sure we're doing things the right way. So make sure you have that. And bottom line, as we wrap things up here, as we head toward our giveaway and our questions and answers, you can do it. I believe, I don't know you. I'd like to get to know you. I'd like to meet you in real life or over the internet and get to know you, but I believe you can do it. You wouldn't have signed up for this webinar if you can't do it. You have been given the baton to finish your creative work. You can produce your best work. Like I mentioned in 2003, when I had all those books and I was going like crazy, but I realized that I wasn't meeting any deadlines. I had to crush everything that blocked me and deal with my fear. It took more time than I wanted it to, but I'm in a different place now. You are too. Whatever is messing you up, whatever keeps tripping you up, you can do it. You can overcome it. So to recap, get over your creative block with the Tom Cruise. Work around your creative block with the Morgan Freeman. Sneak under your creative block with the Italian Job. Go back and to crush your with Michael J. Fox and power through your creative block with Reeves. So what I will do here, we're going to do our giveaway here in just a second. I'm going to put the next slide up here, which is questions, but we'll get to those in just a second. Remember, send your questions in. I see one up here on the board, and we'll get to that in just a second. Remember, before you leave, if you post about us on social media, tag us and use the hashtag Crushing Creative, or excuse me, hashtag Crushing Block. We'll send you the scout book and pen, and the follow-up email to this webinar. There'll be all the details about how you can let us know about that, and so we can get your address information and send it to you. If you create a web post on your website of any kind, we will send you the Crushing Creative Block brainstorming kit, including the $20 Fandango gift card. And so right before we get to the questions, we're going to do our drawing. And I've in the last clip from that movie, I went out and I asked a couple of people out here in our bullpen to choose a random number of all those who've registered and who are attending our group. And with a drum roll, please, the winner of our time is Kathy Gill. Congratulations, Kathy. I will get in touch with you separately, and we will send you the $100 Amazon gift card. It's an electronic card to get to you. All right, so for questions, it's 10:03 now in Central Time. We'll stick around for 12 more minutes to take questions, unless we run out of questions. So if you need to go, I understand that. The recording will be made available. You can look at the questions on that video later. We've got a couple in here. Tina asks, focus comes with inspiration, but getting there is sometimes the tough part. If I'm getting up and walking around every 10 minutes, then I know I need to find inspiration to get past my creative block. There's some great tips on how to do that. Also, thanks for these great comments. I appreciate it. Talking about brainstorming and photo storming usually work for me. I'm glad to hear that. Here's a question. Do you ever seek a change of scenery to inspire creativity? Great question. Yes, of course. Hopefully you have the freedom, Tina, and the others here on the webinar, that you get to walk around, that you get to work from home sometimes or work remotely. That can be very, very helpful. I lived in Little Rock, Arkansas for a number of years, and there was a 4-H center that I loved to go out to. It would cost very, very little. Like I could get an entire classroom at the 4-H center if they weren't booked up for like $10 for the entire day. It was incredible. And so I could go out there. It was quiet. The windows looked out over a lake and over a forest, and I'd have whiteboards, and I'd have a room, and I'd have internet where I could have a change of scenery. You can also get really cheap food at the 4-H center, which was really fun. There were walking trails, etc. So that was my favorite go-to place there. Since moving to Nashville, I haven't found another go-to place, but I will switch things up. There are days I'll work from home. There are days I'll work in the office. But changing scenery can certainly help you. That can be one of your bag of tricks. If you get blocked, okay, shift gears. Maybe you're tired of looking at the same things and hearing the same music in your office, or whatever the case could be. Switch things up. So put that in your bag of tricks to sneak under. That's for sure. So let's see. We have another question here coming in. Jamil wants to know a little bit more about photo storming. So let me see if I can go back to that slide here for us and get a sense of photo storming. Another way of doing photo storming would be to take this picture and take just a portion of it, 25% of it or so, and look at it that way. So if you took this this upper quadrant here with the sky and the Shell logo and the yellow and red, it could just be a sense of, okay, I'm on a blue sky. What does sky mean to what I'm doing right now? If you took the bottom 25% here, you get this SUV. In the case of this image, it looks a little stretched. How do we stretch? So the idea is to just let this, and it's not meaning to give you all the answers to your entire project, but by delving in a little bit, it gets there. My favorite website to use is unsplash.com. I can go there and enter a few keywords or whatever I'm working on, and I'll get some weird pictures that won't have anything to do with the search string. Some of them will, but I'll get some weird ones, and just delving in and then trying to be inspired I also use Google Images often for this. It's not supposed to take forever, so don't use a lot of pictures and don't spend more than 15 minutes photo storming. And if for some reason you're not getting unstuck using that, switch to another trick and move on from there. So let me look and click the button over here and look at other questions that we've got coming in. All right. So Mike wants to know about going back, a little bit more about going back. If you've got any more, Mike, that you want to put into that question, please do so. I'll kind of repeat some of the concept here, so you can get the point. If you don't have what you need, if you're getting blocked, going back to your original inspiration, to the original purpose, something that can be helpful in going back to crush creative block is going and talking to the person who gave you the assignment. I've sat down with my boss a number of times and said, okay, from scratch again, without looking at notes, tell me what I'm doing again. And the good news is he knows me well enough. He knows that I'm not trying to be sarcastic or trying to skirt my work. He knows that I'm trying to get unstuck. So you can probably caveat it that way. But by asking that question, tell me again, you might hear something differently than you did the first time, especially if you are in a fast-paced marketing environment. You're going and blowing, and you've got a marketing director or a CMO who's giving you tasks in a hurry. Maybe you don't have enough information. With our blog calendar this last year, we used this technique for going back. And I set a series of 20-minute meetings with our CEO to sit down and go over the blog calendar and say, okay, what about this idea? What about this idea? And we put 15 ideas away. We deleted them completely because we couldn't remember why we came up with them in the first place, where we were headed, and how they would try to help us accomplish our goal. So by going back, we gained clarity. We swept all that out, went back to 1955, swept 15 ideas off the calendar completely, and came back to 1985 and kept going. All right. So I will vamp here for a couple minutes, but right now there aren't any more questions in the queue. I'm so grateful for you to be a part of this, and I do hope that you'll take the opportunity to post about us on social media, or to make a website link to us, a link to us, so that we can send some gifts your way. I would love to spend several hours at the post office sending out gifts to all of you as our way of saying thanks for being a part of this. If you're going to get a follow-up email when this is done. If you've got criticism, if there are things you didn't like, didn't go well, things you disagree with us about, go ahead and let us know. I like thick-skinned critiques. So I like to know where there are holes to move forward. That's how I sharpen myself. So let's know that. If you liked it, if you felt like this was beneficial to you, tell others. The recording is going to be made available on our website here in the next week or so, and so people can watch that recording and get a feel for this content as before. I'd love for you to be able to share with others, and copy us or tag us on social as you share it. That would be amazing. If you're looking for information about marketing in general, we have built an incredibly deep resources library. Our blog and our resources library, downloads, etc. We've got what you're looking for organized very well on our website. You can come to goldenspiralmarketing.com, click on resources, or click on blog, and dig around and find a great number of articles and videos, downloads, checklists, templates, whatever you need to help you figure out how to move forward in marketing. And if you've got ideas that you would love to see us cover, you can use the contact information there on our website to send us something there as well. So thank you guys so much for being a part of this webinar and spending some time with us. It means the world to me for you to take an hour and 15 minutes out of your time to listen to me to talk about these great tasks that have changed my life. So I wish, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining us, and I look forward to seeing your posts online. Thanks so much.